We've been taught that alcoholics are selfish, weak, or broken. But neuroscience tells a terrifyingly different story. What if that third drink isn't a choice, but a traumatized brain's desperate attempt at self-surgery? And worse, what if your family's love is quietly making it impossible for them to stop? Picture a dimly lit room late at night. The house is entirely quiet. Someone is sitting alone, pouring their third, maybe fourth drink of the evening. Look closely at their face. You won't find a smile. You won't see the euphoric glow of a celebration. What you are witnessing is not a pursuit of pleasure. It is a desperate, silent struggle for survival. For decades, society has fundamentally misunderstood the nature of alcoholism. We label it as a moral failing, a lack of discipline, or an endless chase for a good time. But a brain addicted to alcohol does not care about having a good time. It hasn't cared about that for a very long time. To understand the true psychology of this addiction, we have to shatter the most common illusion, the idea that people drink because it feels good. When a healthy brain consumes alcohol, it experiences a spike in dopamine, the neurotransmitter responsible for reward and pleasure. It's the toast at a wedding, the clinking of glasses after a promotion. But for a brain burdened by unseen wounds, the chemical reaction serves an entirely different purpose. They are not drinking to elevate their baseline of happiness. They are drinking to crawl out of a psychological abyss, just to reach zero, just to feel normal. Alcohol, at its core, is not a party beverage for the addicted mind. It is a highly effective, incredibly destructive form of emotional anesthesia. Imagine living with a constant, blaring alarm inside your head, a siren of anxiety, inadequacy, or repressed memories that never, ever shuts off. Now imagine discovering a liquid that, within minutes of touching your bloodstream, reaches up and pulls the plug on that alarm. The silence that follows isn't joy. It is merely the absence of agony. That is what the third drink in that dark room is doing. It is turning down the volume on thoughts that are too loud to bear. It is paralyzing the fear. The illusion of feeling good is exactly that, an illusion. The reality is far more tragic. They are not seeking a high. They are seeking a pause button. They are seeking a temporary deletion of their own suffering. But as the anesthesia inevitably wears off, the alarm doesn't just return. It comes back louder, demanding an even higher dose, just to buy another hour of silence. To understand why someone can't just stop, we have to look under the hood. We need to stop looking at the person's character and start looking at their neurochemistry. Because addiction isn't a disease of weak willpower, it is a disease of a hijacked survival system. Think of your brain as a finely tuned instrument, constantly trying to maintain balance, a state called homeostasis. It uses two primary chemical messengers to manage your stress. First, there is glutamate. Glutamate is your brain's gas pedal. It keeps you alert, awake, and in times of danger, anxious. Then there is GABA. GABA is the brakes. It is the chemical equivalent of a heavy, warm blanket. It calms you down, slows your heart rate, and makes you feel safe. For someone carrying deep, unresolved trauma or chronic stress, their brain is flooded with glutamate. Their gas pedal is stuck to the floor. They live in a perpetual state of hypervigilance, expecting the next bad thing to happen. Then, they take a drink. Alcohol is a pharmacological sledgehammer. The moment it crosses the blood-brain barrier, it does two things simultaneously. It aggressively suppresses the glutamate, cutting the alarm wires. And it floods the brain with artificial GABA, slamming on the brakes. For the first time in years, the traumatized brain experiences profound, unshakable quiet. Here is where the tragedy truly begins. The brain's limbic system, the primitive, survival-driven part of our mind, takes notes. It doesn't register alcohol as a toxic chemical. It registers it as a lifesaver. The brain learns that alcohol equals safety. It places the bottle on the exact same hierarchy of survival as food, water, and oxygen. But the brain is also resilient. It recognizes that this artificial silence isn't natural. So, to fight back against the depressant effects of the alcohol, the brain begins to adapt. It removes its own natural GABA receptors and starts mass-producing extra glutamate to keep the body awake. And then, the morning comes. The alcohol leaves the bloodstream. The artificial blanket is violently ripped away. What is left behind is a brain severely deficient in calming chemicals and absolutely overflowing with the anxiety-inducing glutamate. This isn't just a hangover. This is what we call hangxiety, a state of paralyzing, chemical terror, the physical trembling, the racing heart, the overwhelming sense of impending doom. It is the brain screaming in agony, convinced it is under attack. At this moment, willpower is completely irrelevant. You cannot outthink a survival instinct. When that person reaches for a morning drink, they aren't choosing to get drunk. They are desperately trying to administer the only medicine their brain believes will keep it from dying. We now understand the biological trap. We know how the brain's chemistry is hijacked. But what sets this terrifying trap in the first place? Why are some nervous systems so desperate for that artificial silence, while others can simply walk away after one glass? To answer this, we have to look past the bottle. We have to look past the shaking hands and the broken promises. We have to look at the invisible ghosts standing in the room with them. In the field of behavioral psychology, addiction is rarely viewed as a spontaneous error in judgment. It almost never forms in a vacuum. When you look closely at the life of someone battling severe, chronic alcohol dependency, you are almost always looking at a survivor. The undeniable truth, backed by decades of clinical research, is that trauma is one of the single biggest predictors of addiction. The statistics are not just numbers on a page. They are a heartbreaking map of human suffering. The rates of severe alcoholism skyrocket among individuals who have endured the unspeakable. We are talking about people who were physically or emotionally abused, betrayed by the very hands that were supposed to hold them. Those who were abandoned, left alone with the crushing, silent belief that they were fundamentally unworthy of being loved. Children who were raised in the suffocating chaos of an addicted household, learning at a fragile age that the world is entirely unpredictable and unsafe. Individuals who were relentlessly bullied, carrying the cruel, mocking voices of their tormentors inside their own minds for decades. Veterans who walked through the visceral, unimaginable hell of war, only to return home and find that a quiet room feels dangerously, terrifyingly loud. People whose realities were shattered by the sudden, incomprehensible loss of a loved one. And countless others who carry the heavy, invisible burden of complex childhood trauma. The kind of pain that isn't a single, explosive event, but 1,000 small, daily cuts to a child's soul. To the outside world, it looks like they are drinking to destroy their future. But from the inside, if you could see the landscape of their mind, you would realize they are drinking to erase their past. They are not drinking indiscriminately. Each glass is a highly specific, desperate intervention. One drink to drown out the echo of a slamming door, another to blur the memory of a face they are desperately trying to forget, a third to paralyze the physical sensation of a panic attack that has lived in their chest since they were 7 years old. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack filled with burning coals. Every step you take, they sear into your skin. Society looks at you and tells you to stand up straight, to walk faster, to just have the willpower to take the backpack off. But the straps are physically fused to your shoulders. Then, one day, you discover a liquid that temporarily freezes the coals. It doesn't remove the backpack, but for a few fleeting hours in the dark, you do not feel the fire. Would you drink it? This is the tragic reality of the addicted mind. When you see someone aggressively reaching for alcohol, day after day, despite the absolute ruin it brings to their life, you are not watching someone who is running away from their present responsibilities. You are watching someone who is running for their life from their past. But the tragedy of trauma is that it never only affects one person. The blast radius of this explosion is wide, and it always hits the people standing closest. Which brings us to the most misunderstood part of this entire disease. Up until this point, we've looked at addiction as an isolated battle between a traumatized brain and a bottle. But that is only half the story. The darkest, most fiercely guarded secret of alcoholism is that it is never a solitary disease. It is a family disease. One person consumes the alcohol, but the entire household becomes emotionally intoxicated by the chaos. To survive the blast radius of this trauma, the family unconsciously builds a deeply complex psychological matrix. They don't mean to, but they begin to step into specific, rigid roles just to keep the system from completely collapsing. And the most heartbreaking role of all is usually played by the person who loves them the most. In clinical psychology, we call this role the enabler. But to the outside world, this person just looks like a devoted spouse, a fiercely protective parent, or an incredibly loyal sibling. The enabler is the silent co-pilot of the addiction. They become the ultimate exhausted crisis manager for a crisis that never ends. When the alcoholic cannot wake up, the enabler is the one who calls their boss with a rehearsed, perfectly believable excuse about a sudden illness. When the bank account is suddenly empty again, the enabler quietly takes on a second job or borrows money to secretly pay the debts, terrified of public embarrassment. They clean up the physical messes in the middle of the night. They whisper apologies to friends and neighbors. They construct an elaborate, incredibly heavy fortress of lies to protect the family's reputation from the outside world. They believe, with every ounce of their breaking heart, that they are catching the alcoholic before they hit rock bottom. But here is the terrifying psychological twist. Rock bottom is often the exact impact required to shatter the profound denial of an addicted brain. By constantly placing a soft pillow at the bottom of the fall, the enabler is accidentally preventing the very crisis necessary for recovery. Every time the enabler shields them from reality, the alcoholic's limbic system learns a new, highly dangerous lesson. There are no real consequences. No matter how much damage is done, the rent will be paid, the apologies will be made, and the secret will be securely kept. By absorbing all the consequences, the enabler is essentially pouring the drinks without ever touching the bottle. We must understand that the enabler does not do this out of malice or ignorance. They do it out of pure, paralyzing terror. They are terrified that if they stop fixing things, the person they love will end up on the streets, in a jail cell, or dead. Their relentless fixing is a trauma response in itself, but it creates a devastating, inescapable paradox. The addiction actively feeds on the enabler's devotion. It weaponizes their compassion against them, and eventually the family arrives at a crushing, unspoken realization. Love, when it is used to shield someone from the truth of their own destruction, becomes just as toxic and just as deeply addictive as the alcohol itself. If the enabler is the co-pilot of this tragedy, the passengers locked in the back seat are the children. Growing up in a home dictated by addiction does not just cause stress, it fundamentally alters the architectural development of a child's nervous system. To survive the chronic unpredictability, never knowing which version of their parent will walk through the door, a child cannot afford to just be a child. They must unconsciously audition for a role in a desperate, invisible play designed to keep the family from falling apart. There are 3 primary roles these children adopt. And if you grew up in a toxic or alcoholic household, one of these is going to sound painfully familiar. First, there is the hero. This is often the oldest child. From the outside, they look incredibly successful. They get straight A's, they excel in sports, they become high-earning professionals. But their ambition is not driven by passion. It is driven by a profound, unyielding anxiety. The hero believes that if they can just be perfect enough, if they can bring enough pride and honor into the house, it will somehow counterbalance the shame of the addiction. They become the family's shiny distraction. But beneath that perfectionism is a child who is psychologically exhausted, terrified of failure, and secretly believing that their worth is entirely tied to what they can achieve. They learn that love is not given, it must be rigorously earned. Then, in stark contrast, there is the scapegoat. This child takes a completely different survival route. They become the rebel, the troublemaker, the angry kid constantly getting into fights or failing classes. Society quickly labels them as a bad seed. But in the twisted psychology of an addicted family, the scapegoat is actually performing a deeply sacrificial function. By creating a massive, loud distraction, they successfully pull the family's focus away from the alcoholic. It is much easier for the parents to unite in their anger over a rebellious teenager than it is to face the terrifying reality of the addiction. The The scapegoat absorbs the family's collective shame, carrying the blame so the alcoholic doesn't have to. And finally, there is the most heartbreaking role of all, the lost child. While the hero tries to fix the chaos, and the scapegoat tries to distract from it, the lost child survives by simply disappearing. They are the quiet one, the one who spends hours alone in their room. They quickly realize that having needs causes conflict, so they decide to have absolutely no needs at all. They never ask for help, they never complain, and they try to take up as little physical and emotional space as possible. They are praised for being so independent and so easy to raise, but they are not independent. They are isolated. They grow up with a deep, crushing conviction that their voice does not matter, and that their presence is entirely forgettable. This is the ultimate tragedy of the addicted family system. You are looking at a house full of people who genuinely love each other, yet every single one of them is living in profound emotional isolation. The hero is drowning in pressure. The scapegoat is suffocating in blame. The lost child is fading into nothingness, and they are all performing these agonizing roles, day after day, in a desperate, silent orbit around one single thing: the bottle. We have walked through the darkest, most terrifying corridors of the addicted mind and the fractured family system. But this is not where the story has to end. Society tells us that the only way to break the cycle of addiction is for the alcoholic to simply throw away the bottle. But if you have listened this far, you now understand the fundamental truth. The bottle was never the root of the problem. It was just the anesthesia. True recovery does not happen when the alcohol is removed. True recovery begins the exact moment the family stops performing the play. This invisible psychological matrix only survives if everyone agrees to stay in character. Therefore, the system shatters the moment you decide to resign from your role. If you are the enabler, the most profound, life-saving act of love you can offer is to finally let them fall. You must stop catching them. You must stop absorbing their consequences and let reality break through their denial. If you are the hero, you must put down the unbearable weight of the family's reputation. Your perfection cannot cure their trauma, and you are allowed to be tired. You are allowed to take off the cape. If you are the scapegoat, you have to stop carrying the blame for a disease you did not create. And if you are the lost child, it is time to step out of the shadows. Your silence did not keep the peace. It only kept you invisible. Your voice matters. It is time to take up space in your own life. For the person actively battling the addiction, the alcohol will only lose its paralyzing grip when the ghosts in the room are finally acknowledged. The underlying trauma must be dragged out of the suffocating darkness and spoken into the light. The brain will no longer need a chemical pause button once the nervous system is taught how to genuinely feel safe again. Anesthesia becomes entirely useless when the wound is finally allowed to heal. Addiction is a disease born in isolation, wrapped in profound shame, and quietly sustained by a family's silence. The sickness might start with one person, but the healing has to start with everyone. If you saw yourself, your childhood, or your family in this video, please know that you are not broken and you are not alone. I invite you to leave a comment below and share your story. Sometimes, just writing it out in a safe space is the very first step to breaking your own silence. If this content helped you understand the human mind a little better, please subscribe to the channel so we can continue exploring the depths of behavioral psychology and healing together. Share this video with someone who might be quietly hurting tonight. Thank you for watching, and please take care of yourselves.